Windows Millennium Update.
Good morning, everyone. This is the Marketing and Media panel. My name is Stephen Johnston. I'm the founder of Launch Media Network. We're the creators of Gamer Launch and GameSkinny, do news and information and social networking for gamers. I've got with me Auverin, who is one of our editors, Jonathan, who is our editor and has a video, and Blane Humphries at the end there, who previously at Novi?
Yep, previously at Novi. The book says I'm an account manager at Novi Unlimited. It lies. I'm actually an account executive at Triple Point PR as of last week.
So, that is us. So, what we're here to talk about is essentially how to attract coverage for your game, both from a journalist standpoint and a social standpoint and a PR standpoint. And so the first step is, why is this important? So let me do a quick survey, just a little bit of you. How many of you are creating a game of some sort? And then how many of you are promoting that, through social? How many of you are just out there promoting it? Okay. So those of you who said you're creating a game, and the difference between those is you haven't released it in any form yet, I assume. Yeah. Okay. How many of you have you released a game on Steam or some other distribution platform? All right, great. So I'll try to use that to tune how I ask these guys questions and what we go over in order to focus on a bit of that pre-release strategy, and which is really critical. So why is marketing important? We asked the critical question here: if a game releases in the woods and no one's around to hear it, did it release? This is the thing of you've spent this time creating something. How do you tell people about it? So, any comments from the panel here as far as why marketing?
Why marketing? Okay, so this is the thing I always recommend people to, when they first launch their game, to kind of do it first for themselves, just to see what all is involved with it, because it's one of those things that people kind of assume they know everything about until they try to do it. And so with us, we serve as more of the, on the PR side, the connection between you, the developer, and press. We kind of take the developer speak and was, what you think you describe your game as, and we make it more press friendly and public friendly and exciting, so that it's not just, what you put together. That's why we, have things like press kits and such, so that we make sure everything is communicated properly and effectively. So that when these guys are writing about it, it's what you actually want the public to see. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the way we look at marketing is really, it's about activating your audience in general. My personal theory from a journalistic standpoint is that very few people create a game without someone in mind that would play it, even if it were themselves. So step one is finding the people who share your interest, or a group of people who share, no matter how large. It's get 1 to get 5 to get 10 to get 100 to get 1,000, and so on and so forth. So talk about activating an audience. So if it's 5 friends or 10 people in an online community, how do you get that audience engaged?
There are a number of ways you can do it. I think social media is obviously very important, and it's the way to reach the most people with I won't say the least amount of effort, but it's a lot easier than some other avenues. Doing things like dev blogs. A lot of people do Twitch streams of game development. You can reach out to influencers, have them cover your games, and when you're ready for it, you can reach out to the media, and all of those things can help you get your ideas to permeate an audience that it wouldn't be able to reach otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of second that with the social media aspect of it. That's a really good avenue, especially when you don't have a budget, because when you're making a game, an indie game especially, you may not have a big budget, and getting on social media and leveraging your circle of contacts, such as friends and family first, and then moving outside of that and growing that sphere of influence is really important.
And so the good thing, the first thing you need to do when you're trying to activate your audience is know who your audience is. And a good way to go about doing this is look at games that are similar to something you might get, whether it's in the same genre or shares a similar mechanic, and figure out what it is that people are talking about with that particular thing and where they're talking about it, and try and target like those communities first to really kind of bring them into your own. And a good way to also go about doing this is if you have a product that's launched or it's about to launch, include your social buttons and social links and stuff on your main menu, so that people can actually start joining your communities and start actively participating.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to do that social and demographic research, like Blane said, is looking at other games and the community around those games and what do they look like, what do they look for in games, and that can kind of inform your strategy moving forward.
Because it definitely doesn't, it's not just isolated to one game. Once you've built a community, that community is far more likely to engage with future projects than it would be to try and market a new project to a brand new set of people who don't know anything you've done in the past.
Sure. Just to add, one of the elements of marketing and the definition of a market is a group of people who actually communicate with each other. So if you've got two groups, they are not, there's no communication between them. They are, in a lot of senses, not in fact a market. So when you go out to communicate, you need to think about sort of drawing circles around groups of people who communicate with each other. And that's often they have a shared interest in the type of game, so they're part of a forum, and there's messaging for them. So think about the people who might interact with each other, whether that be on Twitter or Facebook, forum or whatever, and think about how you're going to message to that group. And also focus your early efforts in terms of audience on those groups individually. Solidify one, look to its edges, and try to grow it out sort of organically there. It's hard to get 5 disparate communities interested in something without significant budget or other forms of effort. But focusing on one of those markets that is communicating with each other is how you get them to do the work for you and talk to each other and spread the word. So we've got a list of here for things to do on your own, and the presentation will be available. A lot of this, when you read through it, you'll say this makes just a ton of sense. Almost anything in terms of marketing is really straightforward from a list perspective. In other words, it's easy to find like the 10 things you should do. There's a lot of effort here under the hood that has to be done, particularly with small budgets. So a website, press kit, media profiles, demos, Facebook and Twitter ads, networking at local meetups. As common sense as a lot of that is, we talk to a lot of people who are doing 2 of these. And they are unwilling or unable to do some of these, or in some regard are just sort of blind to it. A lot of it's just the basics. So talk about the basics, like what makes just a functional, marketing or press approach to you all.
A good website, a very good press kit, and either a great trailer or a good playable demo. That's pretty much the holy trinity of good press outreach.
I know we've talked internally about, particularly with an early game, something playable or watchable is pretty much like table stakes for getting our interest internally. It doesn't have to be playable, but you need to see something. Like a static image is rarely enough. If there's a lot of credibility in the team or other projects and these sorts of things, we can kind of engage earlier. But I think that's part of what you're saying is if you've got something and your only source of credibility is the game, get it viewable or get it playable, and promote that. So Blane may have some ways to.
Yeah. So how many of you all know what a press kit is? Okay. Do you know what to include in one? Oh, okay. Okay, so a lot of people, they're not always sure. I actually just did a consultation on this yesterday. when you're putting this together, like they're saying, you have to show essentially what it is. And the press kit should always include the trailer, screenshots, 8 to 10 screenshots in the press release. And then the press release should also include any assets that you would want featured, because when they start writing about it, that's what they're pulling from when they start writing about it. And so you need to make sure that content is there. If you don't have that, then you're already at a disadvantage.
Yeah, if people want to be cynical, you would say the journalists are lazy. The reality is that we want to focus on the things that are most valuable. And so if you provide screenshots and make the stuff that isn't the additional value that we're trying to provide easy, then we get more time to spend on the things that maybe is the most unique about your game or something you've told us about that's special. It's more about the time that's available, and making it easy for us to get the basics makes it easier for us to focus on the things that make you special.
Yeah, and the other thing you guys got to consider is, I've also been on the press side, and we talked about this before, is when you're on the press, you're getting hundreds of emails a day, and so if you don't have that information, if you get 2 emails, one has the press kit, one doesn't, which one are you going to cover? So that's another way you got to kind of think about this.
It's much easier to be able to look at images in a video with 2 or 3 sentences than it is to look at an email that's 5 or 6 paragraphs long. And when you have those assets you're able to give out to your writer, it not only speeds up the process, but it helps that writer be able to visualize objectively what the game looks like and come to their own conclusion so that they can better write the article.
Yeah, so could you all talk a bit more about process internally? So Blane is down there, has created this awesome press kit. It's got everything it needs. And then how are you all sort of internally taking that and getting to the point where now a reader is reading about that game? Maybe that'll help people understand how critical some of those elements are.
Yeah. So in much the same way that an indie dev is very limited by budget, by team size, and by general bandwidth, publications like ours are also very limited by time, by number of writers, by the resources that we have. And so when something comes through, the first thing we look for is it engaging? Does it present us with materials that we can then present to our audience that will engage them and not only drive traffic to our site, but generate actual interest in the game at hand? So once we see that there is actual interest that we could pull from a particular game, we usually source it out to a writer. We say, hey, there's news to be covered, there's a review to be done, there's an interview opportunity, and we generally let them take it from there and do what writers do best.
Yeah, I think the element there is like every organization has gatekeepers, and so your press kit or your initial contact is sort of a way to get past that gatekeeper. And if it's capable of expressing the uniqueness or the opportunity in writing about the topic or creating some other form of coverage, it's also easier to hand off to another person, right? So Auverin gets it and says, hey, this looks really cool. This looks like there's something unique about this, something we should cover. If she then hands it off to another person, and that information is only because she had to spend a lot of time acquiring that understanding, it slows down the process of handing it off. So we've hit on a bunch of, why it's important to get that initial contact right, which is the softball for Blane here. So when should you consider hiring game PR?
So this depends. It also depends on the services that the agency provides. So with the way we did things at Novi Unlimited is we would put together kind of like our campaign prep doc, where we would ask you all as the developers to fill it out, tell us about the game, tell us if you had any campaign goals you wanted me to reach, or if you had any other initiatives you were wanting to do, whether it was corporate or just game specific. And then from there we would start playing the game to kind of figure out what all was going on. Now, some agencies will provide a little bit of light QA to go with the service, just so they can kind of figure out what it is that's going on in the game too. So if you're looking to get something like that done, and something more long term, also with community growth, social media management, or something other than just launch, you would want to start reaching out to them as early as possible, just so you could start planning. even if you don't hire them right away, it starts putting it, on your radar and you on their radar so that they can kind of start playing and maybe help guide you along how to start communicating whenever you're ready to start in public. But really, if you're looking at just launch, you want to plan that for smaller indie games at least 5 weeks out, because you don't want to hire an agency and then tell them you're launching tomorrow. We've had that happen. It's awful. You also shoot yourself in the foot that way because it doesn't give press any time to cover you, because you need to do pre-launch. You need to give them codes and access to the game before it launches so that they can start writing like the day you launch.
Yeah, and I think that's an important element of we're talking about process too. Is that we see a lot of game covers, AAA's come out days ahead of time, and that is an inaccurate expectation. At different levels in the market, right? And so the part of balancing coverage is getting enough lead time to capture those opportunities that are probably smaller from the publishing side, but valuable. And so the lead time is how we hand it off or put it into a process or some other queue of getting it created. So the 24-hour kind of thing is just not going to happen without some extraordinary effort. So do yourself a favor, get ahead of it. It's more likely to occur. Can you talk a bit about the differences in PR companies that are working at different levels in the market?
If you don't mind me grabbing this.
Go for it.
So a mistake that I see a lot of indie developers make is they will spend most of their budget on hiring a AAA PR company. Because they think that is going to lead to actual success for their game, and that is rarely, if ever, the case. When you're looking for a PR company, it is very important as an indie developer that you look for a company that has established success working with indie games, because the process for an indie game PR campaign is very, very different from the process for a AAA campaign. AAA PR companies can rely simply on the name brand. The name is enough to draw interest. So they can write a 1-page press release, no pictures, no press kit, no nothing, send it out, the media is going to cover it. But that is not the case for an indie dev, and so working with a AAA company that's operating as though your game should run under a AAA campaign is not going to do you any favors.
And to kind of build off of that too, the thing when you're hiring an agency or looking at working with not just an agency or just anyone in terms of media is you're not necessarily just paying for the service, you're paying for the relationship that agency or individual has with the media. And so somebody who has strong ties to a lot of the journalists that will cover indie games is something that's definitely more appealing than a big budget studio, because they don't necessarily have those personal ties.
And shop around. So talk to multiple people. Make sure that they're aligned, with what you want to do and how you want to do it. There are a lot of options. I wouldn't say that it's a vast number, but you should be able to talk to a couple people if that's the direction you go.
Yeah, I mean, having a vetting process in place of looking at the company's history, looking at the developers they've worked with in the past is a boon for when you start out looking for a PR agency.
Blane, you going to say something?
Oh, Reddit's also a good place to search, because a lot of our game dev, I believe, has a lot of the PR agencies and people talk about them on there. So.
Great. So I think we really covered this. So can you all talk about? Do you have anything to add as far as just the role of PR in journalism?
Yeah. So if your game is point A and media coverage is point B, then PR is the road that leads you from A to B. As journalists, it's not our job to market your game. It's our job to cover it, and cover it in a way that will engage our audiences. But a PR professional will go a long way in making sure that we can do our job and that your game gets marketed properly.
Also on the PR side, our goal is to also pitch. So if you guys are doing something that you may not necessarily realize is unique, we can identify that. And if we know, one of these guys is interested in that specific angle, we can give them the idea for the story, and they can run with it.
Yeah, I mean, the more our interest is piqued by, an email or a press kit, the much more likely we are to spend the time and look through the email and cover the game.
So we talked a lot about a PR company. One of the things to consider is that think of yourself as the initial PR. Passion does go a long way in getting people to interact with something. And if you're working on a small project, you're likely really close to it. You know what's unique. So you've got to do a couple of things to get ready. And you can make these communications. If you've got the press kit, if you've got the website, if you've got the demo, you've got the playable version, there's no harm in making those initial contacts. So talk about that dev to site or other forms of coverage contact. They don't have a PR company to help them sort of polish it, but they know what they're talking about because they built this game. They know why it's unique because they made it. But what are the do's in terms of contacting on your own?
You do a lot of reviews. Do you wanna?
Well, one of the things that I specifically look for again is going back to that interesting email. Work on your subject line and work on the first line of your email to get me excited about it. Get in there and be as succinct as possible. Tell me about the milestones where your game is right now, and don't apologize for where your game is, but just give me the succinct information that I need, and especially, like we said, a trailer, an image, PDF, press kit, anything like that to stand out. Don't be afraid to stand out in somebody's inbox, and that's really important, especially with all the emails that we have.
Yeah. And another great way to go about finding coverage, you don't have to email IGN or email Total Biscuit and hope that you're going to get coverage, because it's probably realistically not going to happen. The best thing for an indie dev to do when they are ready to reach out to the media is to hunt down specific writers or specific outlets that are known for covering indie games, and then get in touch with those writers directly so you can kind of bypass the gatekeepers, or go directly to an outlet that is already interested in the genre or the type of game that you're working on.
So, how often? I mean, I've been working on this project for a year. I've been working on it, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, or I've got a day job, but I come home and this thing's like I'm eating, living, breathing it. And you didn't respond to my first email. So do I contact you immediately the next day and be like, WTF?
So generally, if you don't hear back from within a week or so, it's okay to reach back out and just ping them again. Emails do get lost when you have 300 of them coming to your inbox on a daily basis. But after that, don't hound the press. It's not going to do you any favors. The best thing to do is wait until you hit another major milestone, and then reach back out when you have more news to announce, or you have a playable demo, you have a new trailer, you have a new feature, something major that readers can hold on to and really be interested in.
So MailChimp's here in town. They've got this great marketing automation program, and they've got this script, and it says my 5th email should be like, why are you ignoring me? Some sort of sob story is basically what the internet recommends. This is this process. Yeah. Well, you'll find it out there. I'm overplaying it. Because I'm very negative about about automated marketing. But you're supposed to rehook on a personal level. In this space, what do you think of that? Of the authenticity of that? We see it on the business side, where you're sort of hounded, and you probably all get marketing automation emails. What about tone? And are there times in which that tone should change or shift? As you try to get that contact to respond.
Be professional.
Yeah. I mean, so when you start getting desperate, the press is going to sense that and then block you. Because it's no skin off their back to be like, oh, well, this person's not, giving me what I want, so they'll block you. And so that's another thing why it's important to make sure you're targeting the right people, because if you're making a mobile game, don't pitch IGN. It's not going to happen. They mostly cover console. So the moment you start pitching IGN mobile stuff, they're just not going to, they're going to put you on their blacklist, and then you've lost that contact for life.
And I think that does go back to finding the right outlet. If you pitch to one outlet multiple times and you don't hear anything back, then they're just not the right one. That doesn't mean you should stop pitching. It just means that you have to find somewhere else to do your pitches.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, a follow-up email can just be as simple as just circling back on this and wanted to see if you had any interest in covering our game. It could just be a sentence and then have your original email attached to it. It's just as simple as that.
We've had some discussions internally that developers seem to think that we have a personal attachment to every email that comes through the mailbox, right? You know, and that there was some reason that every one of these emails got rejected or, you know, whatever, and we put them through a 10-point checklist. The reality is that things are coming through, we're looking for something interesting, we're sort of segmenting them, and things need to come back in. Your second email may not be in the context of there ever being understood in the first email. And so when you begin to sort of escalate the conversation, it can actually feel out of the blue from our side of that communication, like, hold on a minute, I didn't know this is the 17th time you've emailed me, I'm sorry. You know, so now it's like, it's just the wrong way to go. I would treat almost every communication like it's the first until you've actually achieved that communication. So let me see if we get to it later. So I'm taking this to as good talking points. I think there's a lot of meat here, so I want to make sure we don't. So what about after that first contact? So you've made contact. The person wrote back and they said, you know, this game's neat. It's made in Atlanta. It's a team, you know, out of this school or whatever. There's 3 people who made this game. It's unique. Maybe it's similar to another game that's been popular. They've written that first piece of coverage. So now, you know, every time that I change character stats in the game, do I email the press?
Absolutely not. You only want to email us further follow-ups when you have something big to announce. Again, it comes back to that major milestone. If you've reached a new phase of development, if you're going to full release, if you've added a brand new feature or a multiplayer mode or something very, very worthwhile, that's when you want to reach back out. There are a lot of ways to maintain your contact with the media in the interim until you have something new to announce, but that's really the only time you should be reaching out in a professional capacity to be asking for further coverage.
So I added a character. You know, like it had 4 characters before, I had a 5th character in a fighting game. Blast the press or those people that covered?
Don't blast the press, please.
That depends. I mean, if you are, you know, like Mortal Kombat, for example, yeah, I mean, they're going to do it. But if you are, you know, smaller title, probably not, unless you have something to go with it. Like if you're adding a new character plus announcing a new release date or had DLC or something, then yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, maybe that character, you know, fundamentally changes the game in some way or specific mechanic, you know, that is interesting to the future of the development process. That would be something that would be interesting to know. May not exactly cover that, but it's good to keep that it's a way to keep that relationship up.
And if you have anybody who's covered you previously, then yes, absolutely. You know, even doesn't matter if you have one character, 2 character, adding a new level, then you know, contact them and say, hey, we updated with this. But,
okay. So in terms of maintaining the relationship, you know, you kind of work your way down a little bit on the granularity level and then keep them in the loop.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So let's talk about the knots. And we covered some of this. You know, my big one is that we get a lot of people who send us an email and I can almost just give you the template. We're a small team, 2 people. We've spent all of our time. That's really actually very common. And from your experience, again, this is sort of the difference in sort of the outside and inside experience. Those things are notable. They don't always make it worthy of press. And so team size is a good footnote, and the time you spent working on it's a good footnote. Focus your communication on some other element. That's my axe to grind, so I covered that one. What about you all?
Disclaimers and cookie cutter emails are probably my biggest things.
So disclaimers. So what's a common disclaimer?
I'm sorry my game is not finished.
Okay.
I'm sorry this is this way. I am only one person working on a game.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for this, and this. If your game is in a state where you have to apologize for it, you probably shouldn't be contacting the media. That sounds very harsh.
Yeah, but so you end up in that sort of catch-22, right? Like, I think you know, how do you balance the nothing's ever ready, you know, the sort of a permanent under construction sign. So, you know, Blane, do you have some experience with that, or do you want to?
Well,
how balancing the nothing's ever complete if you're working on a project sort of organically, you know, and you're trying to get things going.
That's difficult.
Yeah.
I was actually also thinking of the things to not do. I have a few really good, two big ones I always point out, and anybody who's heard me talk before knows I hate buzzwords.
Okay.
I always say it. I hate buzzwords. If you use the word visceral to describe your game, I'm instantly throwing your email in the trash. Like,
I mean, I can definitely second that, because as a journalist, it's our job to look at it objectively, and as soon as, you know, words like that start getting in there and start influencing the way that I feel about a game or think about a game before I've seen it, then it kind of puts me off a little bit.
yeah, and I think you guys have probably been on the receiving end of some of my press releases where, like, I try my best to avoid using them, but sometimes the developer will be like, no, we gotta say it's, you know, gameplay's dynamic. And I'm like,
But what does that mean?
yeah. It's like you guys have watched EA's press conference at E3, right? What do they say? Like, they'll tell you an entire paragraph of text, but they don't say anything. So just don't use buzzwords.
So, I mean, your feedback would be like, it's not visceral. Talk about how you dismember a corpse.
Right.
You know, talk about the reality of that.
Like, what is it that's doing it? Yeah.
What are the mechanics that make it happen, and what do those look like? And you tell me those objectively, and then I can put the pieces together.
Right. So the other thing I absolutely avoid recommending is saying your game is like this, but with this. That's the most common description in every email ever. Don't do that.
So I think that phrase tends to come from a standpoint or an approach of the person I'm contacting may not know this thing, and so I'm trying to draw a parallel. It may indicate you're contacting the wrong person, you know, and you're trying to draw that bridge, or you haven't found a person who's really targeted. But otherwise, it's just a crutch. Like, just re-describe it. Just re-explain it. Like, if you are like another game with a little modification, just go ahead and explain it as if it's new. It really will do you. It'll do you more favors that way than to provide that crutch. It's an easy way for a person to go, well, if it's just like that plus that, then.
Exactly. I mean, the thing that we're looking for the most is why it's different than A plus B.
Yeah.
You know, so focus your time on that instead of saying, well, it's like this game and this game put together. Well, what part of your game makes it different than those two combined?
Any other don'ts?
We're going to cover some other don'ts here in a minute.
Okay. Do we have the sample email? We had a person contact us the other day and tell us how they were going to email us until we covered their game, which is pretty much like I've only got a few things in my like spam list or my my block list, and so
don't show up at GameSpot's doorstep expecting coverage.
Well, you know,
Don't stalk us on social media.
We're here local. We like people to stop by. Just no stalking. So Kickstarter.
Oh, Kickstarter.
So I think the Kickstarter's not a strategy; it's a tactic. The difference is that saying I'm going to do Kickstarter does not describe a set of activities that lead to success. And instead, the Kickstarter is an element of that. PAX 3 years ago, I called the Unity Kickstarter demo packs. Multiple people with a booth, Unreal or Unity with like a purchased asset set, and they had a walking demo and talking about how they were going to launch Kickstarter, the day of, the third day of the show or whatever. I mean, I guess for some people maybe it worked, but I mean, for you to think about when you see Kickstarters launch, the successful ones, nothing started the day before that Kickstarter. You know, that was not a like roll out of bed, create a Kickstarter, and then this magic gush of people, you know, appear and put money in. So can you all talk about Kickstarter strategy? What does it really take in preparation? You know, maybe Blane's seen some successful ones he can speak to, or unsuccessful, and sort of what's the difference between them?
So I've worked on a lot of Kickstarters actually. Some have been very successful, like the Wild 8. Some not so successful, and I'm not going to name names. The interesting trend with Kickstarter right now is that it's dying for games. You know, nobody's really doing them successfully right now, and if they are, they're asking for such low amounts just so they can hit their goals. But you know, like you were saying, the successful ones took years of planning, and just to hit, you know, like $50,000, which that's insane. Just the amount of work that went into it. It's almost better to just avoid it at this point.
So I mean, there is sort of like a time to money ratio.
Yeah. Well, so when you launch the Kickstarter, you need to already have your communities built. You need to already have donors that are going to go in that first day, because I think it's like 40 to 50% you need to hit first day. Otherwise, it's not going to matter. Same thing. You don't contact press the day you do Kickstarter. You want to wait until you reach a certain funding goal, because press isn't going to cover it unless unless they have a reason. Like if you raise $100,000 in 24 hours, they're more likely to cover it. But if you get $5, they're not going to care. So
one of the things to think about, and you know, there's different concepts of ethics or how things are done, but you know, if you've got other sources of money, put them into the Kickstarter. You know, use them to kickstart the Kickstarter. I don't think it's wrong. I mean, you know, if you've got commitments for money, the path through which that comes in, even if it's parents, friends, and family, but think of those as the egg that builds any other funding campaign. And if the news of money having interest in your game or coming into the game is then noteworthy to get other money, then leverage it. I think there's some other far shadier tactics in terms of how Kickstarters are done that we're not going to get into here. But just saying, hey, I've got a nest egg and I'm going to use it to sort of push the Kickstarter forward in terms of its perceived value, I think is fine. But it should be a part of your strategy. The more organic way to do that is make sure you have a community who you are openly asking for money if you intend to do a card Kickstarter, and they are committing. And then remember, 75% of those people won't put $1 in when the time comes. But if you had 1,000 people and they said they'd each put $10 in, then you've got $1,000. And so if you don't have that pre-commitment for Kickstarter, it's never going to go. And just simply not.
And no amount of media coverage.
Amount of media coverage, Kickstarter isn't going to help you. There isn't some like magic list you get on that says like these people are super cool because they created Kickstarter. I mean, like there's some other criteria that has to align with it, either through effort or through some form of promotion.
And have a demo.
Yes,
please. Don't do Kickstarter without something people can download.
Yeah.
So there's some other options out there from Kickstarter that maybe are working, some other crowdfunding methods or some stream funding, if you will, like people putting anything together.
I've seen people see some success on Patreon recently. I've seen a lot of indie devs do creation streams where they stream the process of actually making their games, and they get donations through their streams. They have people donating to their Patreons afterwards. People with a strong social media presence, if you have the time and energy to build that can be a great way to filter people towards a Patreon that can ultimately help fund your game.
Well, before we move on from this real quick, one of the things I do see, managing the leads, emails, and things like that is don't rely on Kickstarter to be your press kit, to be the first step in your marketing strategy. Don't rely on those milestones that you put out and those stretch goals to be what the media looks at. Don't just send a link and say, here's my Kickstarter, this is what we're going to work on. It is a part of the marketing process, not the beginning.
We have seen way too many Kickstarters that looked even some that look too big to fail fall flat on their faces. After No Man's Sky and Star Citizen, you have to understand you're working in a market where even your audience, your readers, everybody has been so jaded by failed crowdfunding efforts that it's a lot harder to get them to participate in the first place.
Star Citizen raised a lot of money. That's not a failed crowdfunding. It might be a failed delivery of a game. But it's yeah. Cool. So early access coverage. So this is kind of the critical toddler stage, right? Like it's playable, it's usable, but there might be some really rough elements. So just talk about if you're organically building a game, then doing this sort of stream release, one sort of milestone after another is probably necessary. So how should a developer approach that?
So early access coverage is where we see a lot of developer relationships break down. It's where we tend to see the most issues with working with developers, especially in the indie scene, because there are a lot of different definitions as to what early access actually means. A lot of people will put a game in alpha, they'll put it in beta, they'll put it in early access, and then say that, oh, you can't fault us for any bugs, fault us for any incomplete features, you can't fault us for this, this, and this, because it's early access. But unfortunately to the media, to your audience, to people who are engaging with this game, early access is not a tag that excuses every issue that they come across. So what we tend to advise indie devs do is either not move into early access or not request early access coverage until you have a game product, a demo, like anything that's playable that is an actual representation of what the final product will look like. Because we as journalists, our writers cannot report on what you plan to do with the game. We can't report on what you aspire to do. We can't report on development cycles that haven't been undertaken yet. We can only report on what is in front of us. And if what is in front of us doesn't match your final vision for the game or isn't at least somewhat representative of it, then we can't really do you any favors because we'd be doing wrong by our readers in doing so.
We want to get to questions, so I'm going to sort of hot take this. Anything quick? Okay. My recommendation here is it's always better to be small and good than wide and frayed. So praise makes you feel good, critique makes you better, and that is just really critical, particularly in this early access phase. Look at each of these opportunities or any feedback you do get particularly early. Take it as then this is something I need to fix next or fix now or fix in the future, but ultimately it should make you better. If you haven't been to like art school and had people just tear you up, then go find more opportunities for people to tear you up. It will make you make a better product, as painful as it is.
Yeah. Bad reviews are not malicious. We're
Bad
not trying to
reviews are
hurt you.
bad for you.
It's not our job to tear up a game. It's our job to report on it objectively and analyze it critically. And there's been plenty of games that have been looked at for early access previews and had reviews written about them, and then taken that critical analysis and made their games much better.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you measure what you're doing. In some ways, there's 100 different ways, but if you do something and you don't measure it, then you're forgetting the whole process of improvement. So give yourself time to measure what you're doing, whether that's number of emails that get responses or opens or whatever. Look for tools to measure. Questions? I think we got 15 minutes, right, or 12?
Yeah, what's up?
So, hold on. Are there...
Mike.
She has a mic.
Good.
Yeah, she's a...
Down
Right.
here.
So are there genres of games that are a little harder to, I don't want to say hype up, because like you said, it's your job is to report objectively on it, not just like build it up to anything, but I'm a fan of like puzzle games, platformers, and you don't want to do a piece on just another Final Fantasy clone, So are there genres that are harder to want to do a piece on, I guess?
I'd say RPGs, puzzler games, and probably like walking sims, open world exploration. Those markets are really, really oversaturated right now. So they're the hardest for people to break into and get coverage on. I don't know if you have any others.
No, I mean, I'll go with my. I would agree with that. No, I mean that you're right.
If the writer's super into a genre, then they probably have some sort of way that they've discovered to sort of consume the information about the game and then explain it. What you may find is that it's not that it's harder for any individual writer to explain, but there's fewer of them that kind of get it.
Yeah.
Or the particular outlet just isn't covering that kind of thing. And that can be some of it market, some of it's just it's probably more related to the person you're talking to.
Yeah, and that's again why it's important to hunt down the right writers and the right outlets to make sure that you're in touch with the right people.
It's the internet. There's something that's interested in all this thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how big the publication is if you can start small and move up. So.
I have 2 questions. They're pretty related, but I'm hoping that I can get 2 questions in. My name is Vin. I'm the artist and designer of a small indie project of 2 to 3 teams. The first question is, when it comes to starting off your social media campaign, do you believe that followers would rather see a game that's in progress and they want to follow it through its evolutions? Or do you believe that first impressions matter and they kind of want to see how your games or your screenshots or your GIFs or whatever of how the final product would be? And the second one is, when you are making social media, what is your opinion of, do you make a team social media and brand your game and have a professional outing, or for small teams of 2 to 3, a more personal Twitter where you market yourself and you become the face of the game, such as Toby Fox for Undertale or the developer of Stardew Valley?
Okay, so to, I guess, begin tackling this, most people who are going to be following indie games, especially on social media, care to get invested in the project, especially if they're in it from kind of the ground level. And so at that point, they want to see the development cycle. They want to see the work you're putting into it. They want to see the steps you're taking to make it a reality. And so it's kind of okay. You don't need to have this super professional presence. You just need to show that you are connecting with people and that you're putting effort into doing it. Now, the trick, though, is how do you get people interested in that? That's difficult, especially with the way Facebook and Twitter have kind of limited who's seeing news on their timelines, on their feeds. So that there's certain like hashtags and certain trends you can kind of capitalize on to kind of push that, but you don't have to necessarily worry about being AAA professional at the starting levels. You just got to show that you are putting the effort into doing it and kind of get people interested in you or interested in the company, not necessarily just the one specific game. Is that
Yeah, I think the thread there is like sincerity and passion. Like we see all kinds of different personalities in the indie space get some success on a personal level, but they all like really put their at least initially that sort of passion for the project out there.
So with like 50 games a day at least on Steam launching, how can you, or I guess what percentage of these games do you feel like are actually getting coverage in the media? Because like, for instance, I look at Metacritic and, Metacritic will list all the games by release date and you can see how many of them have a Metacritic score, and it's very, very few, mainly AAA games and big indies,
It's a very small amount.
I mean, you've done the analysis and seen the numbers. It's a small amount. There are other ways to promote games than through an outlet that's going to show up on Metacritic. There is a whole genres of
I just see it as a way
games that never show up there.
Gauge like how much coverage somebody's
getting.
Yeah,
I mean
the Metacritic score.
The reality is that there's a huge number of people creating small games, and a lot of those games get sales. A lot of those games get some level of success, but they don't always get coverage.
And I think it's also worth keeping in mind that Metacritic is a very, very small slice of the actual coverage that games see. There are probably 10, 15 sites that are on Metacritic that are based in the U.S. It's a very, very small number. And in comparison to the number of outlets that are out there and actually giving coverage to these games, what actually appears on Metacritic is very, very slim.
So another thing to also think about is when you're getting coverage, even if the site isn't necessarily large, if you get enough of the smaller people, also like smaller YouTubers, Twitch streamers, and outlets in general, it's also boosting your SEO ranking. So if you have all those extra sites linking back to you, while they may not necessarily have the largest following, they're also helping you in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, having your own website helps in that regard too with SEO. Being able to have those specific keywords that people are searching for on your own domain, or even a subdomain. If you can't afford the monthly fee, there's Squarespace, Wix, Weebly. There's plenty of places where you can create your own website, or you could even develop your own. So.
Cool. At what point after launch, if there's not a lot of traction, would you say that it's not worth trying to do PR or keep contacting media, that it's better to just move on to maybe the next project?
I think that's really up to you. It's going to be sort of your appetite or ability to withstand silence. It's going to have to be a personal decision. I would think of, if you're trying to crank an engine, sometimes you got to kind of start over. And so it's worth kind of going back to fundamentals, trying to crank it back up, if you've got the time.
Well, so I'm taking it, I guess, in a different direction. So if you've launched and it's been like, I don't know, about 2 weeks and you've still got nothing, probably time to move on then. Just because, the game's not new. It's not news anymore. They've already moved on to the next news cycle. So, yeah. Does that help? Okay.
So, right here. I have the microphone. If you put yourself in the position of a small developer with limited financial or time resources, where do you feel, and you can even give percentages if you want, your efforts are best spent, from traditional media outlets to YouTube influencers to your own social campaigns? What would you think the best distribution of your efforts would be?
So you talk about you doing it personally and not having any outside help?
Well, you might have outside help, but let's say you have $100. Where's the best place to spend that $100? Like bang for your buck, kind of.
Right.
I would say community engagement.
Yeah.
And something to build your own community, whether that be a small mailing list or something like that, is probably, it's like you would almost just look at it as like how you would build like a matrix of capabilities, whatever you should do for marketing. And the first thing is like find 10 people that love what you're doing and talk to them. And if that's the only point you ever get, like there's no reason you'd ever abandon that, regardless of how much money you had, right? And so that's kind of the place to start. The interesting thing, I mean, you see these YouTubers, I mean, what is it like, these games that like Happy Wheels or whatever that get just massively. A lot of times that's someone in that YouTuber's community became interested in a game and then says, hey, you should play this game, and then it hits that. So like, if we knew how to create virality, and we really knew how to create virality, then there'd just be a whole bunch of people creating viral content. And so the thing is to get opportunities for virality to occur. And those come mostly through the organic relationship with the community of interest in something, who then that network spans out, and that initial seed is the virality.
So I'm actually going to elaborate on that one real quick.
Okay.
So if you are looking for an agency or any professional and they tell you that they can guarantee a viral video or something, they're lying. Don't trust it.
It's like red flag.
I know.
Run away.
They can sound convincing. They'll make it sound, oh, we have media relationships with this. That
we have a patented algorithm that our CEO spent 6 years. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work, and we're not going to tell you that, but it's patented.
Well, take Facebook, for example, talking about building the community. I mean, your biggest brand advocates when you first start making a game are going to be your friends and family and your contacts. They're going to be the ones that want to share what you're doing more often than not than anyone else. And as you build those spheres, they'll show it to other people. They'll talk about it to other people. And that's the very first organic step is to leverage those communities, whether that's Facebook or Reddit or a forum or Twitter, or find out where that audience for your game is, where the most brand advocates for your game or your personal brand are, and start there and move out.
And if you can't go out to anywhere and find 5 or 10 people that you're not related to, or that you didn't go to school with, or that you don't work with during the day, if you can't find 10 people that aren't in those 3 other groups who want to talk to you about your thing, it might be hard to find any bigger group than that. And so, on the small side, get those early successes. But it's not your grandmother, it's not your best friend, and it's not the people you work with. Like, they're going to tell you when you sing in the shower, it sounds great all the time. So find other people who aren't in any way connected to you. So
I have to hop in here. I think we have about a minute left, so I don't think we can do any more questions. But we will be in the expo hall. If you folks want to chat a little bit more, we will be in the expo hall from, I think, 2:30 to 3:30. Yeah, 2:30 or 3:30. I'll be there. Our PR guru back there, Kat, will be over there. I think Blane will be joining us as well. So if you want to chat more, we'll be happy to talk to you there.
Okay. And I love talking about games and indie games and everything. So Stephen J at GameSkinny.com. Send me emails. Send me the non-press. I just like talking.
There's your first press
conference.
contact.
Yeah, there
it is. Hey.